Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Sophia here. Welcome. And if this is your first time, I want you to be able to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Let's get into it. How to recognize when I am triggered. What is a trigger? A trigger is a biological response to a past event, something that reminds you of an episode, reminds you of something that you experienced. And so it shows up in your current space, disrupts your thought patterns, the very core of your belief system can be interrupted by a trigger. And so, if we look at what elicits triggers, one of the core negative statements that we often get are that automatic thought that we notice as we are being triggered. So, one, let us be aware. So, self awareness is key to be able to practice self control so that we're able to respond instead of react. When we think of triggers, let us also notice that when we're able to mindfully process the event, sit with the event, that trigger, understand the core belief surrounding the trigger, notice the ebb and flows of the trigger when it shows up. What are you doing when it shows up? So, what shifted for you is also important. As you continue to notice these triggers, be curious about it. Notice how you're responding and being able to practice self compassion. Let us look at the very space that triggers reside. We call it the limbic or the emotional center of our brain. And in our clinical space, we realize that working with clients, we're able to walk them through rational, irrational thoughts based on cognition. So, cog is that thought process. And this is where triggers reside in the limbic or the emotional part of our brain. And we know that very oftentimes when we are triggered, it perhaps results in us going to our first thought process or automatic thoughts that we all get. And so if we're able to notice it, notice the language that surrounds the messages that we receive, and notice what elicits these triggers. What are we listening to? What are we hearing in the different parts of our stories? What's meaningful for you will be helpful in how you're able to not only recognize when you're being triggered, but how you're able to process what triggered you. Not every situation requires a reaction. Again, being able to observe and evaluate the triggers. Look at your what. What is that trigger about? What does that remind you of? Is that something that, reoccurred from your family of origin? Is that something that sets you back in terms of when you are being triggered? How are you able to respond with kindness, mindfulness, thoughtfulness without reacting to it? So that's very important. What is the connection between What triggered you? As you reflect on that, notice the parts of your story, perhaps the unresolved healing that reoccurred. Remember, I said there are ebbs and flows in your healing journey. Your journey looks different from everyone else's journey. Your healing journey is personal. Your healing journey is not a destination, it is a process. So, as I work with clients, I am able to walk clients through traumatic experiences. We go from the information gathering to the decision making. And so, based on that, in our counseling spaces, we are able to collaborate and create a treatment plan goal. So, it's very important in my clinical space, at least, when I meet with clients, to get a better understanding of what the presenting concern is. And so it's throughout our conversations, our dialogues, that I'm able to get a better idea. So I'm able to ask different processing questions as to what brought my client into therapy. What are their expectations from our therapeutic relationship? And so it is during that time that I am able to ask different questions based on, what they need to work on, and building that therapeutic alliance. My clients will be able to better understand themselves in terms of their therapeutic process, what that looks like for them as they are able to work through their presenting concerns. Does that mean that clients are able to process within 3 to 4 sessions and know what triggers them? Understand that as we build our therapeutic alliance, as we are able to engage, and as the therapist, I'm able to hold space for my clients. So, one, before they are able to work through, they are building that therapeutic alliance with me. We build rapport by asking questions so that they're able to get a better idea of where they are in their journey and what being triggered looks like for them. So it's very important to notice that you may be on a healing journey, perhaps a year or so, and you've gone to see many therapists, and you realize, or so you thought, you had healed from an event, a trauma, for example, and several months later, several years later, you realize that you are being triggered. It doesn't mean that the work was not done. It simply means that it's a part of the process, it's a part of the journey. It could be a reminder. For example, there are some who have experienced being in a car accident, and the very smell of, certain things just remind them of that event. So they experience being re-triggered. So, as I said, re-triggered, when you think of triggers, it's also coined in a way where you are re-experiencing that event as well. So you are being reminded, you are reliving. And so that's why I mentioned earlier, it's important for you to notice what showed up for you. Again, it's a biological physiological stimuli that shows up from your past in your present, and you may feel triggered. So understanding, recognizing when you are triggered, what was taking place when you are triggered, what was your response to being triggered. And it's important to notice these things. Why? Because the reactivity to being triggered is important. And as you notice these things with curiosity, with thoughtfulness, as you sit with it, not push it away, but sit with it to get a better understanding of where you are in your healing journey. And as you think about reliving the past in the present, this can also skew how you see the future, right? So, accessing therapeutic services so that you're able to unpack these moments with your therapist in a safe space. Remember, in order for us to heal, we must be able to feel safe, and we must be able to have a better awareness. We have to be aware so that we can address it, so that we can put a language to it. We can't heal it if we are not able to address it or name it. So the language is important. When you are triggered, what language are you associating with being triggered? For some, this may look very distressing, as if the work was not done, but it's different when you are being triggered and identifying the what, the why, and how you're going to be able to work through the ebbs and flows of being triggered. That's very important. It is crucial to notice these things. So, again, when we're able to practice self control, for example, if you notice you're becoming very anxious, then that's also a good time for you to notice what are the triggers for the hypervigilance, and what are some of the unhealed parts of you that you have noticed when you are being triggered. So noticing the awareness is key. Insight into the experiences of being triggered. As you practice self reflection and you're able to physiologically know what parts of your body do you feel that the most. For some, they may feel triggered, an increased sense of chest pains, heartbeats, especially if they're in the presence of someone who they absolutely don't feel safe with, then that's also something to notice. Let's take, for instance, if, you are consuming certain things and you're noticing every time you watch this show on Netflix, you are being triggered. So, guess what? It's a good time to understand you may not have the capacity or the bandwidth in that moment to be able to sit through that particular movie and watch it in its entirety because it's a trigger, it's a reminder. So, that's not a healthy space. So, noticing what you are, participating in, social circles, crowds, all of these different things. Notice what is triggering you and being able to take a step back so that you can, reflect and work through those unhealed parts of you as you are being reminded. How much news are you taking in? It may not be, a good time for you to intake so many of what you're seeing. Your eye gates are important, your ear gates are important. What you see and what you consume, that can also be a part of what is triggering you. So, recognizing these things, what are you watching? What are you participating in? The conversations, the porous boundaries, all of these things can be a trigger. So, being able to cultivate the space, being able to recognize these trigger points and utilize the prompts, as I mentioned earlier. So, guys, hopefully that's something you can, resonate with and share and recognize what the triggers are. When are you noticing these things, and what you are empowered to do can be transformational. So, again, thank you so much for being here today. Guys, comment below, like, share, subscribe, and until the next podcast, be well, be safe. Bye for now.